defend the blue in our red, white, and blue. We get so much from the ocean, we're giving something back. This Blue Vision Summit was tremendous, but it was just the beginning of a growing wave of change. The sponsors and the organizers and Victoria Bell and lots of Kaylee and lots of other organizers, volunteers put this together. Last night at the reception, I talked to a woman who said that she'd flown across country at her own expense because she expected to meet with people who are going to educate and inspire her in a way that she can go back and be more effective in fighting for the ocean. And it's what it's about now, is fighting for survival. I mean, last year, the hottest year on record, following 2014 and 2015, we're in the third mass extinction event for coral bleaching around the world. 1/5 of the Great Barrier Reef died. So we're seeing these cascading disasters of industrial overfishing, of pollution, of loss of habitat, and fossil fuel-fired climate extinction basically driving us. And at the same time, we now have this other threat, which is a president and Congress that are in denial on all these things. And essentially, at the Science March, we've reached the point where even scientists have to go into the streets to defend fact. So because it's public domain, I saw a sign at the Science March that's now one of our logos. The oceans are rising, but so are we. And today, with an intensity of knowledge, we're going to move forward. Tomorrow, we're going on to the Hill, Capitol Hill, to let our elected officials know that the oceans matter and that people who love the ocean vote, and that we're going to vote the ocean and vote the coast. And like Saul Alinsky said years ago, there's two poles of power in this town: money and votes, money and people. And we're going to, we've seen the resistance that's emerged right after the election with the Women's March, with thousands of people who went to airports across America to defend immigrants and refugees like my parents. We've had the Science March and the Climate March, although I was here 2 weeks ago. I was a little, put off that when we marched past the Trump Hotel, they didn't have a phalanx of riot police guarding it. I felt like we were sort of being dissed that way. But the next wave of action is going to be ocean action. And, we're going to have the largest Hill Day in history in terms of a citizen lobby to protect the ocean, to stop offshore oil and restore funding to the agencies, our frontline agencies and allies. And then on May 20th, we're going to have Hands Across the Sand. And we're building the next wave, which is about, people who care and love their ocean. Great, and we have ocean champions on the Hill. I see one of them is already here. So I'd like to, we talk about the seaweed, the marine grassroots organizing that's going on that we have to expand. So Cindy, if you want to come up. Cindy Zipf is head of Clean Ocean Action New Jersey, one of my original board members at Blue Frontier, and is here to introduce one of our ocean champions that we're going to be visiting with tomorrow, but he's come down here himself.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Thank you all so very much for coming to Washington, D.C. As David said, the seas are rising, and so are we, and I am profoundly honored to be able to introduce a ocean champion from New Jersey. New Jersey hasn't always been synonymous with a clean and healthy ocean. We've had our bad days, our bad years, our bad decades. We were the ocean dumping capital of the world with 8 ocean dump sites where it was legal to dump sewage, sludge, acid waste, industrial waste, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But we were fortunate that we had a galvanized people of all interests, from commercial fishing and recreational fishing, garden clubs, divers, boaters, swimmers, and surfers, of course, to rise up. And we had strong leadership as well in our Congress to stand up and make a change. And that's when I first met now Senator Bob Menendez as a congressman, as we took on a very significant challenge of what to do with 6 million tons of dredge material coming out of New York and New Jersey Harbor. And it wasn't a very easy problem to solve. It was very vexing. There were a lot of different competing interests. But at the end of the day, that dredge material that used to be dumped in the ocean is now being treated and managed in an environmentally sound way, and we have a deep harbor, and it's a green port and a great model. So that's the kind of example that Senator Menendez brings to these complex issues, and he has been absolutely steadfast in his effort to help fight offshore oil and gas drilling. At the time with Senator Menendez, they were the dynamic duo that stood up and committed to filibuster any kind of effort in the U.S. Senate that would lead to offshore drilling. He's fought for funding for our EPA, for Superfund, for the Beach Act, which makes sure our waters are safe for swimming from sewage. Again, he is fearless and he is tireless, and I am so proud and honored to introduce Senator Bob Menendez.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Let me thank Cindy Siff for her indomitable spirit. She is a real champion for New Jersey's coast, along with all of those who follow her at Clean Ocean Action. Let me welcome you to Washington, and thank you for making your way to the 2017 Blue Vision Summit. And I really mean that. Whether you are a conservationist or a beachgoer, an oceanographer, an activist, a scientist, a student, I want to thank you for making your voice heard. You're here because you understand that our oceans are not just part of our national heritage, they are a vital link to life itself here on Earth. Our oceans serve as our planet's circulatory system. They regulate our climate, drive our weather, produce more than half of all oxygen on Earth. Our oceans nourish us with seafood serving as a primary protein source for over 2.6 billion people across the world. And they sustain us economically and culturally. They keep entire economies afloat, supporting industries like tourism, recreation, science, fishing, and the trade that flows to our harbors and seaports each and every year. In New Jersey, our front seat to the Atlantic Ocean is integral to our way of life. Our shores are home to generations of families, vacations, bustling small businesses, and vibrant coastal communities. And while I may be partial to the Jersey Shore, the reality is that nearly 40% of all Americans live along a coastline. So the future of our nation and our planet is therefore inextricably tied to the health of our oceans. That's why in recent years we fought so hard to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, to promote more sustainable fishing practices, and to protect some of our most pristine waters from oil and gas industry exploration and exploitation. Unfortunately, not everyone shares these priorities. In just a few short months, the Trump administration has made its environmental doctrine crystal clear. Or maybe not that clear, you can't quite see through it. Dirty energy profits above clean air and water for our people. We saw it in their efforts to roll back President Obama's Clean Power Plan, with their efforts to conceal the impact of seismic testing on marine life, and most recently with the dangerous executive orders issued on April 30th. Executive orders that threaten to let big oil auction off our coastlines to the highest bidder. For the past several years, I've worked tirelessly with Cindy and many others, alongside many other people here, surf riders and Oceana and many others, to get a bill on drilling in the Atlantic included in the Obama administration's 5-year leasing plan. And finally, in late 2016, the Interior Department finalized its oil leasing policy for the next 5 years. Now, I'm no mathematician, but I never expected that a 5-year plan would be revisited 6 months later. Yet, here we are. The administration is moving to tear up that 5-year plan, which basically took the Atlantic off the table, and let big oil write up a new one, one that requires at least 2 offshore leases in the Atlantic each year. For oil companies, we know that offshore drilling comes down to a simple cost-benefit analysis. The initial costs of offshore drilling are paid by the American people, who see billions of their tax dollars funneled away from things like education and infrastructure into oil company coffers each year. So big oil gets to drill, and the American people get the bill. The industry also enjoys a cap of $134 million on their liability for the economic costs of any spill. And guess what? Huge portions of the penalties they pay are tax deductible as well. So for oil companies, low upfront costs and limits on liability are a recipe for huge profits. But for our shore communities, the risks are high and the rewards are low. And everyone who benefits from living, working, and vacationing along our coast stands to lose, as well as our ability to be good stewards for future generations of Americans. My home state of New Jersey is just one example. An oil spill would threaten our tourism industry and the 500,000 people that employ it. It would threaten all of our commercial and recreational fishermen's opportunities, and it would be a generational loss. And it would tank coastal property values worth over $700 billion in New Jersey alone. But the dirty energy giveaways don't stop with tearing up that 5-year plan. The White House has also announced its intention to allow drilling in waters that were granted permanent protection by President Obama, something that we advocated for. Now, there's just one problem with that. I hope you notice my emphasis on the word permanent. The protections extended by the President were crafted by Congress to be respected by future administrations and shielded from special interests. So once a president, from our view, made a permanent designation of taking off certain canyons in the Atlantic off the table, that was it. It was permanent. That's why efforts to ignore these protections are likely in violation of federal law, and why some of America's most stalwart defenders of our environment have already filed suit. But if giving big oil a green light to expand offshore drilling weren't enough, the administration is also working to roll back regulatory safeguards aimed at preventing catastrophic oil spills like we saw in the Deepwater Horizon tragedy, a tragedy that cost the lives of 11 workers and the livelihoods of thousands of coastal businesses and communities. So here's what I'm doing, everything in my power with a few of my colleagues, to prevent this administration from undoing our hard-won progress. Last week, I reintroduced the Coast Anti-Drilling Act to permanently ban all drilling and seismic testing in the Atlantic with record support. We have a record number of colleagues who co-sponsored it, and you can help us build momentum by asking your representatives to co-sponsor the Coastal Act, and by signing on as citizen co-sponsors at menendez.senate.gov today. I've also teamed up with my friend Senator Ed Markey to urge the Department of Interior to uphold their 5-year plan. And we're keeping up the pressure by introducing new legislation to stop dirty energy companies from writing our federal energy policies. But we have to do more than just defeat the latest threats from big oil. We have to be relentless and proactive in the stewardship of our beaches and coastal waters. Take the appropriations process, for instance. Earlier this year, the White House released a reckless budget that defunded the Environmental Protection Agency and many other critical agencies that we care about. We had a big win last week in Congress when we passed a spending bill for the remainder of 2017, one that protects our investments in conservation, in science, and in coastal habitat restoration. I was thrilled that we secured nearly $10 million for beach grants, a program that has been on the chopping block of not just this administration, but also the last. Last year, 25 of my colleagues joined me in an effort to save this program, and we prevailed. And we did it because of advocates like all of you who made your voices heard. Now, that may sound like small victories, but they have a big impact on our wetlands, our estuaries, and wildlife habitats. And as negotiations over the 2018 budget pick up in the months ahead, I'll again be leading an effort to fund Beach Act grants and protect NOAA's coastal restoration programs. And once again, we'll be calling on all of you to speak up. Let me close by saying in times like these, I know that sometimes people can be discouraged. There's no question that big oil and other corporate interests enjoy a lot of influence in Washington. But let me be clear. You have a lot more influence in your hands than they do. You have a lot more influence in your hands than they do. The question is, just as they have capital, will you use your capital and those of your friends and colleagues? There's a reason I spend so much time in the Senate defending our oceans, supporting scientific research and promoting a clean energy future. The people of New Jersey care about it. The nation needs it. And so does our planet. So don't let this administration give you any impression that it can run roughshod over our oceans and beaches without hearing from the people who live by them, who work by them, who want to leave them cleaner and healthier for future generations. We can't resign ourselves to playing defense in the Trump era. If we want healthy oceans, clean beaches, a safe climate, we have to be vigilant and steadfast stewards of our environment. And it all starts with you, advocates from every corner of our country and all walks of life, telling your elected officials where you stand and asking them, where do they stand? Where do they stand? And you'll probably get to see in your visit some staff people, and they're good people, but I'd say, can I see my senator for a few moments? And I'd make the point. Because I'll tell you, when people come to visit me, it makes a big difference. I've known they've taken time out of their life, out of their families, out of their work, because they care passionately about something. And when those people are from my home state of New Jersey, I listen. And I hope they will too tomorrow. I hope we see a big blue wave on Capitol Hill so we can change the course of events. Thank you very much for having me.
We can protect our ocean and our blue economy and our communities.